Hi, welcome. My name is Keren, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Linear B. And we're going to talk today about asynchronous development for dev teams. So, going to jump and dive right in. I want to first maybe create like a formal definition of what async dev, and then talk about the role of async dev and its position, in the timeline of the history of software development lifecycle. So first of all, async dev is when not all of the team members are located in the same geographical area, and sometimes or very often not in the same time zone, which is a phenomenon that became more common in the last couple of years. And in order to understand like the role of async dev and why is it happening now, let's talk about a little bit of like big movements and big steps that happened in the history of software development. So 20 years ago, you had like Agile Manifesto, which was a great document that was written at the time. I still had the opportunity to work in companies that work in waterfall format, so experienced the pain there. And Agile took us and from, instead of investing in comprehensive documentation, dedicate more time into working software and iterating on it. Then 2014, we started another like big movement started, Devops, which is still, I think, not fully, we still didn't fully optimize or like utilize like all the good stuff that DevOps has to offer, but it closed another gap, the software delivery gap, right? It's not just about how we develop software and how we build it, it's more about how we ship it. So if you think about it, Agile was all about how we iterate. DevOps is how we ship, and async dev that is happening now, it started in 2020 and goes into 2021, is how do we interact and how do we align with the business better? And we're going to talk about the tenets that make async development and why they make sure that we actually align with the business better. Like I said, I'm working at Linear B. One of the interesting things, the cool things about Linear B is once the pandemic hit and people were working from all of a sudden, we were able to see, since we see a lot of data, what's happening in the dev community. And we saw two interesting things. It happened to the community, but it also happened to us, by the way, for our team. And two things happened. One, people had more time, so they were generating more code, more functionality. They had less meetings, and it took some time like to arrange everything, so they were generating more code. The second phenomenon that we saw that was happening everywhere where there was a dependency in somebody else, right? So I needed somebody like to review my PRs. I need like the CI work like to make sure like that it all the tests are like passed, etc. Everything there was a dependency, things got a little bit more delayed, and it makes sense, right? Because not everybody is sitting in the same place. So for us at Linear B, because we were utilizing our own tool, we were able to identify those phenomena really fast and dedicate time to fix them and get our cycle time back to normal and back to working in a very nice cadence. And by the way, a lot of the other customers were able to do that too. So if we want to talk about async dev, we need to cover 5 tenets. And I'm going to quickly go over them. And I'm just saying up front, our focus will be on 10 and 4. We're going to go quickly on 1, 2, 3, and 5. And I'm going to dive deeper into 4 because that's the most important one that we're going to talk about today. So let's start with tenet 1, that asynchronous is the default form of communication. And in this slide, I want to take you first to this quote. It's taken directly from the Agile Manifesto. It says that the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. And this was so right to that time, 20 years ago. But in our days, when the reality is that a lot of teams are still remote And even now that we'll start to come back to the offices, it will still be a little bit of hybrid. And you have offshore teams, and you have a lot of people all over the place. Some companies are choosing to be remote, first. This statement, it can't hold like the test of the time. And what we're seeing in companies that identifying it is that they're rethinking about mostly the rituals, what kind of rituals and ceremonies need to stay synchronous and in the same place, and everybody needs to be listening. Sometimes we've seen like stand-ups that are now going, instead of like being a 10-minute update, going into like 40 minutes, 45 minutes. So it's very important to acknowledge that, and and what we're seeing is that companies that are reactive to that and are able to ask themselves like very honest questions. Should we keep all of these ceremonies and rituals synchronous? Sometimes take advantage and stay more productive. So they use mentions, they use other stuff that helps them like improve. So remember, tenet number one saying that async is the default form of communication. Let's go and talk about tenet two. Tenet two says that Git is a central element of the dev process. And I want to start in this slide to talk about the system of record paradox. This is an interesting test. You can run it and go and talk to every dev team that's out there. And if you ask them, you ask a product manager or a project manager, hey, how do you track progress of your features, stories, etc.? Where do you look to see that things are on track? Most of the times the answer will be, hey, my project management tool, which is like Jira, Clubhouse, all of those all of those like systems, which makes sense for the product manager, because this is where they plan, this is where they do their backlog, this is where we choose the scope for the iteration. Now, if you go and ask the same questions at developers, what they will say to you, my PRs and my branches, the things that I'm working on, represent like the best. Where am I in the dev process? So you have this paradox where some members of the team are looking at system A, and other members of the team are looking at system B. And the honest truth is that Git contains empiric data that you can't game it. It's not dependent on somebody dragging a task to the right place in the swim lane. So if we somehow can reconstruct an image of what's happening from Git, it's the most reliable data, and it plays a major role in the dev process, right? So for the decisions that we take on how we work with Git make more impact on the developers and their day-to-day than are we working Kanban or Scrum. The tenet number 3 talks about the role of project management tools, which is super important, but it's important in everything that happens in the planning phase, in choosing what to work, in defining the scope. Once the week started or the iteration kicks in, the discrepancy between the system that we talked about, it's only getting worse, right? You might start with a synchronized version, but then once the work started and things are getting pushed and the PR is getting merged and even released and deployed, it's hard to keep track and keep updating the status of tasks. So the discrepancy between the project management tools and the Git tools is only growing as the iteration or the week continues. So the thing to take out of this is to remember that it's very important to plan with these tools, but not try to abuse them to represent like a live state in real time. So it's a very important tenet because it helps, again, to strengthen like the choices that we make on where do we track visibility on progress, where do we do planning, etc. I'm jumping to tenet 5 because, like I said, we're going to focus on tenet 4, which is like the continuous improvement. In tenet 5, I want to talk about how dev teams are the core of the business. And I'm going to jump to this slide and focus you on this quote again from the Agile Manifesto directly. It says that business people and developers must work together daily through the project, which again was very smart statement for that time, but it assumes something that kind of hurts, where we want to take and where we want to, how we want to build like the right organizational model. It assumes that the very in the sentence you can see that there's two types of people. There's like the business people and there's the developers. And this assumption, I think, is wrong for these days. Again, give a lot of respect for when it was written, but for these days it's wrong, because it kind of like maintains this wrong organizational model where you have business on one side and the people who are building the product on the other side, and they're siloed. And here's the form of communication that you have between them. The business is saying, hey, this is what we decided that we need to build. And the developer is saying, okay, this is our status, this is our progress. And then it's only going, like, decisions on what to build and how to build are going one way, and status updates are going the other way. Now, a different model that works better, and we've seen it working with the customers that adopt Async Dev or adopt this approach specifically, is that we treat every developer as a decision maker. When you are implementing a system, when we're designing, and even when you're writing code, every line of code is almost a business decision. You need to have all the context, all the business context of why we're building this thing and why we're choosing this approach. And if you're equipped with this information, what happened is that you get all the context. The dev team are integral part of like the decision making, because they build something and they provide transparency. Then there's a refinement, the refinement of the requirements of or architectural decisions could come from the business or could come from the developers and the dev team who are part of the business too. So there's a refinement of how to build and why we're building that. And it's an ongoing cycle. It's a stronger model because of two things. The first reason is that everybody feels like a part of the mission. That's very important. And the second thing is that the biggest companies in the world were built by developers that kind of understood like a business need and knew how to translate it to real life. So this is unleashing that power, right? When you have developers that are equipped with understanding of the business and why we're taking these decisions, they're taking better decisions every day, and everybody is more happy. And this model has been proven as much more efficient than this siloed model where there's business on one side and developers on the other side. So remember, the fifth tenet, it says that treat the developers and the dev team as a core element of the business and not as something that is outside of it. I'm going to jump to tenet 4, which this is the one that we want to be focusing this discussion today, is how you commit to continuous improvement and make it like a daily practice. I want to start and say that when, again, I talk and our team talks to, I would say between 5 to 10, dev teams every day, maybe even more right now. And there's something interesting about the best teams, or the teams that are, you can define them as elite, are the ones that are staying restless, even if they say, okay, we're in good shape, right? Everything is working for us. Like we understand how to plan, we understand how to execute. We have CD, we have test covered, where everything is working for us. These teams are staying restless and they're asking themselves always, what is the next thing we can improve? So continuous improvement is a daily practice, and it's also like a mindset thing that the best teams are able to adopt. In order to do that, you need like those 3 elements that we kind of compiled under the name software delivery intelligence. You need visibility, context, and workflow. And it's really simple if you think about it. Visibility will show you your metrics. Context will tell you this is the reason why it's that good or it's not where we want it to be. Workflow will help you. How do I deploy rules that will help me either preserve this behavior or improve it? So if you think about it, it's a really simple framework, and we strongly suggest like to adopt this framework of continuous improvement, because it's proven itself as the right thing that not just give you visibility, but help you drive this continuous improvement. So again, visibility, context, and workflow. I want to use this slide to share a couple of examples and run them by you. So one of my favorite examples is a thing that sometimes in the industry we call it scope creep, meaning we scoped and we decided on what we want to work in a specific epic or story, and we think that we kind of like grasp all like the things that we need to do, but as the iteration continues or the time passes, like we discover more and more things. So one way to look at it, if we have visibility into that metric, we can look in a specific time frame with tools like LinearB and say, you know what, 30% of what the team is working on is things that we don't know, that we didn't plan for them. They don't have a ticket associated with them. We don't know exactly what it is. Then we can track that number. Is it 30%? Is it 20%? By the way, the average is between 30 to 40%. 30 or 40% of the work that dev teams are working on, you can really quickly understand to what it relates. Then context will help you to get this list, really quickly identify the things that do relate to stories or epics or efforts that we committed to in this time frame, and we didn't do a good enough job to actually classify them, so we can now classify them. So context will kind of give you the more data to understand why is this number at 30%, right? What kind of behaviors are causing it? Could be that a lot of the work is non-functional work that we discover that we have to do in order to push the effort on. So context will explain why is it happening, what kind of behaviors are causing this unidentified work to be here. And workflow is even better because you can set up a policy that says, hey, every time we identify a branch that we don't know to what it relates, we can send like a message very quietly to the developer and say, hey, can you help us? Do you want, or even better, do you want the system to help you to correlate it with a ticket or open a new ticket that will kind of explain to where it belongs? Now you establish a behavior that helps you improve and drive that 30% down. You don't need to wait for 2 weeks or 3 weeks cadence in order to improve that. You see it in real time, and people are getting, notified, and they're involved, and they take part in the continuous improvement. So visibility, context, and workflow are super important to that continuous improvement mindset. You can almost think about it. If you have visibility, it helps you improve because you came from like darkness to seeing something, but it will give you the first like 20% of improvement. We've seen that if you have the other elements, you can go to the areas of 50 and 60% improvement. So remember, visibility, context, and workflow. Now, let's take another example. And I like to take this example and focusing on the cycle time, which is a super metric that is constructed out of actually 4 segments or 4 separate metrics that will help you understand your dev process the best way. So if you think about it, cycle time, it's really simple. It's from the first time a code was committed until it's deployed. And it could be, by the way, that it's still not tied to value, right? It could be that it's part of like a large story and we need a lot of other elements to be there. But the advantage of being able to move things quickly through this pipeline is that a rollback is easy. If you have like an explosion in production, it's much more controlled, it's small. You want to work in small chunks as possible and push them through the dev pipeline. So let's talk about cycle time. Cycle time is constructed of coding time it takes from the first commit until I'm issuing a PR. You have flavors now. Sometimes you issue a PR early on. I have customers saying, hey, but I'm issuing a PR the minute I start to work. So there are like ways around it. It's usually a draft PR or work in progress. But when a PR is ready to review is when the coding time is basically over. Pickup time defines the time it takes from the PR is up until somebody is saying, okay, I'm taking it, I'm reviewing it, I gave a first comment, I gave a first review. Now it could be that you have like 2 or 3 cycles of review, but pickup time says how many time passed from when it's up until somebody picked it up. And review time is all about those cycles. Could be one review cycle, could be multiple reviews, but we're already in the review process. How much time it takes from when we started it until it's merged, the PR is merged. Then once the PR is merged, could be that we have CD in place and then it's going out immediately, but could be that we want to wait and we're working with a feature branch and we're only going to deploy it later. So it's interesting also to measure how much time it took from when the code was merged and ready to the main trunk until it was deployed. All of those together will give you your cycle time, which is a very super interesting metric to focus on. Let's talk about review time in this example. Review time, we explain what it is. So if you have visibility, which is the first element with software delivery intelligence, you will know, hey, my review time week over week is, I don't know, 2 days or 3 hours. But you have a baseline. Remember, it's not that 3 hours, 2 days is bad and 3 hours is good. Start and understand where you are and try to improve it if you think it's important. And it is important for review time. So, and pickup time and all of those elements. So let's say I know what's my review time, week over week, iteration over iteration, and know what that number is. And now it's a great start because I know I need to improve it. Context, so that's the visibility element. Context will take you to the next level. It will say, hey, you know that review time thing? Here is a story that's being delayed because the review is taking too long. It's already like in the third or fourth cycle, and this is being pushed. And it says, hey, this story of custom reports is now being delayed because of that specific review. So it wraps specific, PRs that are waiting with the relevant context and give a good picture of what is being delayed because of that. And then it drives a good behavior because people will see it and will say, okay, but this is an important story. It's a success criteria for us. We want to continue and push it. So the context element, take it one step further. It says, I'm not just give you a number and visibility. I'm going to point and enrich data around it to tell, hey, here are the things that are broken. Here how you can fix it. And then once you identify that you have a problem with long reviews, you can actually set up a policy that will help you improve. So you can come to this screen and say, yeah, I don't want any reviews that are taking more than 1 day, 1.5 days. Every time that happens, I want the team to be aware. I want an alert to go out. I want to decorate the PR and say, hey, this PR is delayed. I want to do, remember the async communication thing? I want to do things that I don't need to get, hey, everybody jump on a meeting right now, let's fix it. I want to put a mention in the PR and send a Slack alert so people can consume it in their own time, but they know there's a problem here. So this policy will really, really take it to the next level of helping driving improvement, right? I will set it in this example for 1.5 days. And then what will happen is that every PR that crosses the threshold, now we'll send an alert. Hey, long review detected. Jump in and see if you can improve the time and make sure like that we're pushing things faster. So again, I'm taking a step back for a second and say, visibility is great. Know your review time. Know if it's like on average 1 day. It's a great baseline. Now you want to improve. Second phase is give rich context to identify why this is happening. Why is my review time at 1 day? How can I drive it like to improve and make sure it's like a couple of hours? So the context will help you to identify. Once you identify and you had a great discussion with the team and you're committed to improvement, choose your threshold and your policies to deploy something that will work for you, right? Will wake you up when you need to review things faster, would point you like to the right PRs that are waiting too long, and will activate you. So leverage the power of the data to in an SDI framework to be working for you. So now I'm going to show you a couple of examples for all these three elements: visibility, context, and workflow out of our product. So first, with visibility, it's basically seeing some great metrics. Some of them are visualized in a pipeline way because it's important to see them side by side. Some of them are more trends driven. a couple of good examples is, detecting process bottlenecks. We talked about it, but team health is a very good example. We have a metric called burnout. If the team is working, week by week, no breaks, working in weekends, you can see that the metric of the burnout will go up. So it is important to get visibility to those elements. By the way, burnout is a interesting topic in the COVID days, because the main thing that is happening, people don't have like a cutoff point where they say work has ended, now I'm starting my life in a work-life balance. And people are always on mentality. So team health is a very important and interesting metric to track, and you have visibility to it. Context will give you, again, another push. You see it here. You can see the things that are delayed. You can see where you have scope creep. In the team health example, you can see the specific people who are burned out, and you should probably reach out and talk to them. So remember, context will take you to the next level and will help you improve. And then workflow, you're seeing a couple of examples here. One is like this notification. This specific one is a PR that was merged without a review, because that team defined a policy that they say, hey, we don't want PRs at all to be merged without review. You can control specific areas that you might allow it, but in this specific area, we don't allow it, and we want to be notified when it's happening. So that's the workflow piece. You can see another example of, hey, when things are ready, you see all the branches around this story like being merged and released, move this automatically through the swim lane, not in a naive way, but once you have enough, not in a naive way of a specific task, but once you have enough, this is the advantage of intelligence. Once you have enough branches that are showing that it's already released, you can move it to done or in progress or whatever the policy that we configured. So this is a good example of workflow. I'm going to wrap it up. This is the last slide. And say, first of all, thank you for staying and listening to this session, and offer ways to continue to learn about the things that we discussed here and more. There's like 3 levels of engagement. The first one is, if you want to read more about topics like this, there's a lot of resources in linearb.io. There's a metrics runbook that not just will tell you about which metrics, it will also offer you how to deploy them. There's a Discord community and a podcast that we run, where you can consult with peers, hear about similar problems. So once you're ready, move to this phase and get a lot more out of the community. You don't have to be a customer to do that. And yeah, once you're ready and you passed all those 2 phases, sometimes the best thing is to just try the product. We give the product for free for teams under 8, free forever, not free limited, free forever for teams under 8. And we can also offer a full-blown trial if you want to try it with a bigger organization. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you soon.